authors. I'm Joanne Morrell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short nonfiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. A.R. Levett has a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Communications with honours. He is an award-winning emerging Western Australian author with multiple poems and short stories published in a variety of local and international publications such as Creatrix and The Writing Magazine. Andrew's story mentoring services help writers to hone their skills and turn their ideas into engaging stories. He has taught at Edith Cowan University, served on the Catherine Susanna Prickard Writers Centre Board of Management, and runs regular creative writing classes at the Fellowship of Writers WA. Wow. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for being a guest on the Hybrid Author podcast.
Hi, Joe. How are you going? Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So you're known around Perth in the western suburbs as the story mentor. Just wondering if you can tell us a bit more about what the Story Mentor is and how you came up with the idea for the business.
So the Story Mentor is a small business that helps beginners and emerging writers, either teaching them skills and structure to write their stories through the series of workshop I run, or reviewing and editing their manuscripts to see what works and doesn't work so they can proceed with the next draft in a more informed manner. And how I came up with the business, well, about a few years ago, John, a member of a speculative fiction writing group I was part of, advocated editing and that I should turn my skills into a business. And it seemed so obvious at the time, given that I'd studied at ECU and I didn't know why I hadn't thought of it already, but I knew nothing about how to run a business. So as a chance would have it, the government actually offered people the opportunity to learn about how to run a small business around this time. Oh, wow. So I jumped at the chance and used the skills I learned from that to start the Story Mentor.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, because I haven't really seen too many other services out there that kind of run, do what you do. So, and how long have you been going for? How long's the business been running?
I think I'm going into my fourth year at the moment. Wow. So it's been going pretty well, slowly building every year. I mean, a few issues with because of COVID last year, but still, yeah, it's going strong.
Thank goodness for the internet.
That's right, yeah. It was such a relief to have Zoom to do the creative writing classes last year for the second and third term. I think it was the second and third term. And obviously it's not as nice as being in a classroom with people because you don't have that energy there, but it's a good second option to have. Yeah,
that's it. We're lucky as writers, we can kind of just pivot that way. It's a good industry for that. Yeah. So within the services you provide, are you contacted by writers on specific areas like manuscript assessment over services like editing, or have you had quite a good mixture across the board?
Most people sort of contact me regarding help with their novel. In the capacity of a manuscript assessment or a series of mentoring sessions. And so both of these are quite similar in that I give an informed review of their story. They just differ in the scope. For example, mentoring is more about ongoing support where I review up to 10,000 words and meet with them on a regular basis, which is usually monthly. And so we discuss their story, my review of it, and any issues they encountered along their writing journey. And then we sort of come back to each other on a monthly basis or depending on what's capable or what's possible between both of us. And obviously, since writing is such a lonely and confusing process, it's great to have constant support from an informed person during the ups and downs of the process. It's also beneficial to those who get lost, and I'm someone who to talk to when they lose their faith in the story and their writing abilities, which is all part of the process. A manuscript assessment, on the other hand, is like a one-off service where I review the whole manuscript from start to finish, and it can be a bit more comprehensive since I have the whole story to review at once, but perhaps it lacks the intimacy of that ongoing support of the mentoring sessions.
Fantastic. And you offer, I think, around about 3 editing services. Wondering, when you're undertaking a substantive edit over a copy edit or a proofread, can you explain what some of the differences between those 3 edits are for our listeners?
So substantive edit is also known as a structural edit, where we sort of get into the meatier stuff. It's kind of like assessment, but in far more depth. Like I look at things like whether the story flows from beginning to end, if it's using effective structure or whether that could be changed, point out plot holes that need to be resolved, check for consistency of tone and style, look at things like whether your manuscript needs more or less content, figure out if you're using the most valuable point of view, if you're writing in a style appropriate for the target audience, and I condense unnecessarily wordy language. And I also format the manuscript so that when you submit it to an agent or a publisher, it looks professional. So this is really for when you're really stuck with your novel and you need some help to get at the bones of the story and flesh it out from there. Copy edit is more of a word-by-word, line-by-line edit of your story's language so that what you mean to say comes across in the most effective way without creating any confusion for the reader. And proofreading is basically what it sounds like, is I read your story and point out any typos and anything that might have been missed at the copy editing stage.
Fantastic. Is there many common editing blunders you've seen from any of those 3 edits?
I do actually, because one of the most important things about writing prose, at least in the modern era, is showing rather than telling. And so many writers to not know what this is about or not know how to implement it. So for those listeners who don't know, what it is, showing is where you take the reader directly into the protagonist's point of view, or the protagonist or the point of view character, and so you take it directly into what they're experiencing, so that the reader experiences it as if for themselves. And so what this does is it makes for a much more engaging reading experience. And what's important about showing is that it teaches your reader, or treats your reader as an intelligent person, because rather than explaining exactly what's going on, which can be a bit brain numbing, and that's also telling, you're actually using the character action and dialogue to infer something that the reader has to decipher to understand the story. Showing is important because reading is a very active experience on the part of the reader. And the more you can show rather than tell, the more your reader will be able to directly engage with the story. And this is something I seem to need to teach a lot of the writers that come to me for help.
Always feels like there's such a fine line between kind of showing and telling, and it can feel obvious that the big points you can show, and then I think a lot of people get confused about how much they're supposed to show, or there's bits that they can skip over and kind of tell. I guess if they want to emphasize a scene or something major in the story, then showing's the best way. But if they're walking down the street and it's of no importance, you can maybe just tell that rather than kind of show.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, for transitory moments and stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun in that. What are your editing tips for aspiring authors, if you have any?
I think one of the most important things I found, a lot of the reasons I got into writing was because I didn't know how to express myself in a very good way, and writing really helped me do that. And so one of the best editing tips I can offer for aspiring authors is to undertake a course on the fundamentals of the written language. And now I know a lot of people think, oh, that's the most boring thing in the world that only people at school should learn. But being able to express yourself comprehensively and succinctly is one of the best skills a writer can have. And learning about how grammar and punctuation work to communicate meaning is a big leap towards in that direction. So without these skills, you'll struggle to tell your story in an effective manner. And I've also got a few other tips here. So self-editing is a great skill to have, to learn how to edit your own manuscript. But I recommend that you do that before you submit it to anybody. But one of the best things to do if you're self-editing is to read your work aloud. So you'll be surprised at how many times you can read your work on the screen and gloss over obvious mistakes. I know when I was at uni, there was an assignment I did, and the word was meant to be creatures, but for some reason I put creates there, and every time I read or redrafted it, it just stayed there because it seemed like it was the right word, and obviously it wasn't. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had any issues like that.
I think I've seen a puzzle. So it's not really a puzzle before, but it's almost been a paragraph that is written with the words, each word with the correct first letter and the correct last letter, and you can, but all the other letters are jumbled up, but you can actually read the whole thing. Even though it's wrong, you can read it being that way. I think I always mix up from and form. That always, and I think the corrective spelling or spell check doesn't really pick that up sometimes, so you need a bit of an eagle eye. Would you suggest as well, it's not directly editing, but kind of resting your manuscript and then going back to it with the fresh eyes can maybe pick up a few things you've missed?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I recommend doing at the end of every draft that you've completed is put it aside for 3 months. And so get it out of your mind.
Ooh, that's long.
It seems like a long time. But I mean, you need that space to sort of let it go, and you come back to it and you're less precious, and then you see it anew, as you said.
Yeah. So all those years I've written something, then left it. That's me just letting it rest to go back to it. It's not procrastination.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Or misdirection.
Yeah, that's it. Something else that people have mentioned is, or that I think is a good tips, printing out your manuscript is a good idea, because when you're looking at a screen, you're sort of looking at it the same way, whereas if you print it out, it looks differently. And another way to look at this is to change the font of your manuscript with each new draft, because then the text appears differently, and so you're not printing the same thing.
Good, I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one. I don't know. I guess how many times do you think you should self-edit, just until you kind of feel like it sits right in your gut type of thing, or?
Yeah, that's what I would suggest, that you've done the best, or you think that you've done the best that you can, and then you send it off to somebody like myself or an agent or whatever it happens to be.
Or until you can't stand the sight of it anymore. You've used all the fonts. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And you're obviously a writer yourself of works. How has having your own work assessed by publishers or other colleagues helped your writing career? Well, your writing work, I would say, and the assessment you give to others?
Yeah, it's been quite a very helpful process in the end. So one of the best things I did at uni was I joined up with a critique group of peers from my classes. And so it was quite a fascinating experience. Like, we would meet each other to review each other's work. And I would learn a lot from their feedback on my work, but also from editing their manuscripts and seeing what they were doing. So seeing, why are they doing this? And then having a chat to them afterwards and seeing, okay, that kind of works, or maybe it doesn't. And that taught me a lot. And that's kind of the same when I review my clients' manuscripts, because sometimes it forces me to go and check out something that I'm unsure of. Whereas when I'm writing my own work, I just go, I think I'm a bit lazier in that respect. And then I go, I'll work that out another time. But with a client, obviously, I have to go and do it.
Yeah. Was the critique group that you were part of, did everybody write different genres, or was it everyone was writing the same kind of stuff?
No, all over the place. I was writing film scripts at the time, or TV scripts, I think it was. I can't remember what everyone was writing or what genres they were, but definitely lots of different things, yeah. And I think that sense of variability and it made it more interesting, because that's one of the tips I like to a lot of my clients, is that read things that you wouldn't normally read. And so that's what a critique group allows you to do. You read genres that you don't, and you can learn from them to influence your own writing.
Good tip. Yeah, I wondered about that, whether if everyone's not writing the same thing, does that make a difference? Or I suppose, and you can apply anything, I really think, to whatever you're writing there. So
if you're looking at like I did with my the second book of my science fiction series, or speculative fiction series, is I've recently just had some beta readers read it, and while the general consensus was very positive, they gave me a lot to think about regarding characters and likability and science beneath certain environmental events and so on. And so I think in that respect, because I was writing science fiction and these were science fiction readers, I thought that was very useful, because they knew the sort of things that needed to be in that genre. So I think it's good to have some people in your genre who are writing the same thing as you, but it's also good to read other things as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And your beta readers, are these people you know from the critique group, or you found people in that genre?
Yeah, just from a writing group that I used to run up at KSP, and a few other, and actually one of my clients, she's such a great writer. She's just I thought I've got to send it to her. Yeah. And she probably gave me the most amount of feedback. So.
Oh, wonderful. And what are the key aspects of story that you might be able to share with us, being the story mentor?
So this is quite a complex question, and I could give you a lot of answers, and I'm sure different authors would give you lots of different answers too. So I've got a few things I'd like to mention. So first is that one of the key aspects of the story, at least in the beginning, is being inspired to write something. And because if you're inspired to write it, that inspiration or enthusiasm for the story is a good sign that you'll have something interesting to say by writing your story. And if it interests you, it's likely to interest other people, or they'll want to read it as well. But that's obviously just for the first draft. Obviously, beyond the first draft, that inspiration or enthusiasm is also important, because writing can be a long process and even laborious. So you need that urge to urge you on to keep rewriting the story until it's the best you can make it. And so without it, your interest will inevitably sag, and you may well give up your writing, which is probably the worst possible thing when it comes to writing. So losing your faith in your story and your ability to write is a regular part of the writing process, which I don't want to get your listeners down. But that's
no, the truth of it.
Yeah, it's realistically, when you're writing, your mood will sort of fluctuate from this is utter rubbish, I'm a hopeless writer, and wanting to quit writing altogether, to this is the best thing I've ever written and I can't wait to share it with others. And so this is sort of, in my experience, and I've heard a lot of other writers speak about it too, this is sort of a ongoing thing that sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're in the middle there. But if you sort of just become aware of that, then you can sort of take the best advantage of that and write when. Well, realistically, I'd suggest writing all the time. Even if you're writing rubbish, you're getting something on the page and you've got something to go back and work with. I forget who it was that said, not writing anything, you've got nothing to work with. But if you're writing really bad stuff, at least you can edit or revise it later on.
That's it. I've heard even if you're sort of stuck, even just starting to write, someone, it's not someone I know personally, but I'd heard they just start writing out song lyrics just to get the whole action happening until they get a flow going, so.
I know I tend to write a lot of lists when I can, so I suppose everybody's got their own process.
Yeah. And would you classify writing every day like emails and text messages, or not really?
No. Occasionally I'd suggest that you do a couple of pages or something like that every day, I think. But yeah, it's certainly part of the practice, I guess. Actually, there was another thing that I wanted to mention is that I think story structure is a very important part of writing as well. I'm a pantser, and so even as a pantser, is somebody who writes by the seat of their pants, or that's where the term pantser comes from anyway. So even pantsers who don't know where the story is going until they write it, I certainly find that that structure can be immensely helpful. Not in the first draft, obviously, because for me the first draft is very much about just getting down what I'm thinking on the page, getting down the story as I see it. Although obviously it can help if it's sort of ingrained in your mind, going, oh, well, maybe it's time to start resolving this character's arc, or maybe wrapping up another plot line. But I think it's more useful in subsequent drafts where you have the gist of your story down on paper, but you need to work out how you can convey it in a way that will entertain readers and make sense of them. So this is like adding things like conflict, character, development, theme, setting, plot, symbolism, and so on. So these are all things that I sort of teach about in my creative writing class. And a lot of the students that come there see that a lot of these things are actually already present in the story, even though they might not have known that. It's sort of that. That's what my classes are really about, developing awareness skills and then identifying them in your story and other people's stories. So they might see that some things are there, but other things aren't. So that helps them build their story up.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And out of those aspects, would you say they were all equally important parts that make up a story, or do some take precedent over others, like, character or plot? I suppose they sort of one can't go without the other, really.
I suppose on the whole, I guess there's more. All of them are important in their own way, but I think the key elements for me to write a story are character and conflict. Because characters are what readers and viewers relate to, and so without a character in a scene or in a story, there's no way into the story for the reader. And then without conflict, you have no story either, because just a character there is not so much a story. Like in life, when you put multiple people together or multiple characters together in terms of fiction, conflict naturally tends to evolve because of their different beliefs. And this is where I think good storytelling comes from. So obviously all the other elements like plot and all of that are important, but I think character and conflict are the core elements of storytelling for me. And so with just these two, you can create a good story.
That's it. And do you think this is, not something I'd written down, but do you think like in the first page, those two things have to be front and center to grab the reader? The conflict has to be presented, maybe not just the first page, but it definitely obviously in the first chapter, I'd say, and obviously the character.
I think that the best stories do begin with character, and that there's a hint of conflict in the background there, and that they're going to, okay, there's something happening, but nobody's doing anything about it at the moment. It's when we get to the and so as the story goes on, we're okay, what's going on with this character? There's something going on here, and they're not doing anything about it. And so that creates a bit of conflict between the protagonist and the reader. So that's kind of the conflict there, if you will.
It's quite hard, I suppose, especially for aspiring authors, to know how to balance these story aspects, from kind of beginning to end, to make for an engaging story. I don't know if you've got any tips to recommend how someone might gauge that kind of balance.
I think my main tip is just to go with where the characters are telling you to go, or what the situation is telling you to do, rather than going by any particular formula or guide like that. It's more about, just going with what you feel is right, or what the story is about, and then maybe coming back with these sort of elements and looking at them. And I think that sort of comes as part of the process of you just working on your novel. And I know that sort of sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I think the more you write, the more you sort of start to do these things unconsciously. And
probably the more practice you get, the more understanding you gain on how these things are, I suppose. Yeah. Another thing that sort of can throw people off as well is, I guess, your recent experience with beta readers. Did you have quite a lot of conflicting feedback from your beta readers, or because then it's kind of, I guess it's your choice on what you believe to listen to, or,
Absolutely.
that makes it difficult.
There were several things that were quite similar, and so what was good is that I sort of they staggered their feedback, I suppose. So I was able to get it differently and ask other people questions that other people that I thought, well, that doesn't sound right to me, and so they sort of usually confirmed my side of the thing. So it's interesting all the different things that different readers bring to your text.
Yeah, that's awesome. So getting more into the sort of publishing questions, with the edits and assessments you've conducted for your clients' manuscripts, are you aware if they're being prepared mostly for traditional publication or independently publishing? Do they talk about that with yourself? Or
most people want to go for traditional publishing, and I'm not sure why that is. I think it's more because people see that as the side of publishing, as if I made it, and the sad fact is that realistically that's not the truth of the situation at all, because when you're writing your story is only part of the process. And I know a lot of writers, especially when you're beginning, all you want to do is write. And I completely sympathize with that, because that's what all I want to do.
Yeah.
But even if you go through a traditional publisher, you're going to need to get out there and promote your book as well anyway. And so when you go and look at things like e-publishing and self-publishing, realistically, you do these sort of things, whether it's because you can't get in with a traditional publisher, or whether you have these skills like myself, like things like cover designing and editing. I mean, while self-editing is obviously a good skill, I'd always recommend that somebody go and see an editor, because you will always miss things in your story that an editor will pick up. I think being an author in the modern age is kind of different to how it was for the classical writers, where they just sort of submitted it to a publisher and publisher took over it from there. Whereas these days you have to self-promote, you have to have a social media platform or an author platform. You need to consult with the editor and the cover designer and things like that. And I think the sort of traditional publishing and sort of e-publishing and all that, it's all sort of the same skill sets that you need these days. And yes, you might have a bit less pressure with a publisher, but obviously you've got to realize they're coming at it, they're trying to get it out there to sell it.
Yeah, and I think
I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it does. I think as well, a lot of publishers are kind of under the pump, and they don't have a lot of budget for marketing these days, or to spend on debut authors. So there's that kind of expectation.
Exactly.
And again, it's probably if you've got a platform, whereas somebody else who doesn't, then they can sort of see that as more work that's got to be done on their part, or they could reach more people if you've got a following already. So it would be nice just to do the writing, wouldn't it? And nothing else.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're on the cusp of publishing your young adult speculative fiction series. Would you like to tell us a bit about that series? How's that coming along? You've just had it beta read.
Yeah, I've just had the second book beta read, and so I'm in the process of going through all of that material and implementing it or not, and then hopefully I'll have to send it off to an agent. I'm hoping to go the traditional publishing route, but why that is, I'm not so sure. I think I'm just keen to work with other people who are enthusiastic about as enthusiastic about my story as I am.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also something about holding a physical copy of your book in your hands. And of course, there's that smell of a book that can't be beaten. I don't know if you've experienced that, but there's just some tactile situation there.
Well, you can still print on demand through independent publishing, but I am on a path to find a traditional publisher for my children's fiction, simply because I want to have that experience from industry professionals, whereas the independent stuff that I publish is nonfiction and more based on my experience, so I don't really feel like I need someone's consultation there. I know kind of what I'm doing, but well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. It's been wonderful speaking to you. Lots of story and editing tips there for aspiring authors. That's great. You've got a couple of upcoming workshops happening yourself. Are you able to share the details on those?
So my creative writing classes are starting up again. Please come along if you're interested. If you just want to come along to the first session and see if that works for you, that's fine. It's $30 a session, or there's a discount if you do it per term or for the whole year. You can check out more details on that on my website, www.thestorymentor.com.au. And that's about all the workshops I have coming up for the moment.
And where can people find you online? Are you on Facebook? Or?
Yes, I'm on Facebook under The Story Mentor, or obviously my www.thestorymentor.com. That's my business website. I've also got an author website, which is Levett, that's Levett, .weebly, that's weebly.com. That's my author portfolio, I suppose you could say. So I've got some short stories and publications and stuff like that up there if you're interested.
Fantastic. All right, Andrew, thank you so much, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thanks, Joe. Catch you later.
That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.